Hi guys, I'm Charley Law and welcome to the podcast. We're going to be speaking to all sorts of people about how they've managed to make real, hardcore, tangible change to their lives, be it personally, professionally, physically, or emotionally. It's my biggest fear in life to have regrets and unfulfilled potential. So I want to understand what my guests actually did. What was that moment that sparked change? And what really made the difference? What nuggets, what tools, what resources, what disciplines, secrets, non-negotiables actually moved the needle, enabling them to navigate adversity, make change, and build a better life for themselves. Please enjoy. Let's get into it. Well, Eduardo, look, thank you so much for doing this. I know that you don't do many podcasts, so thank you for making an exception. I think I want to get straight into it and talk about something that kind of personally for me, knowing you but not knowing you that well, has observed from the outside, and even doing a bit more digging with the lead up to this interview on LinkedIn and your Wikipedia, is your career trajectory from JP Morgan, investment banking, very successful corporate, to then going to Tanzania, to then doing pick with community ecosystems, and then moving on to Tyndall, bespoke boutique finance for Latin America, and then Burn to Give, the sort of community wellness thing, and that evolving into Betterfly, this billion-dollar success story. The big question I've got for you is, 6 months before you started JP Morgan, had you strategically thought about this, probably not the specifics, but had you always planned to, right, I'm going to go and do 10 hard years, bank some cash, get the right connections, then move on to do something more mission dread? Like, just talk to me about how strategically you thought about this journey and these stepping stones early on.
So the short answer is no, that was not the plan initially. So look, I studied engineering in Chile and graduated, early 2000s. One of the things I'd always like about engineering, and it's probably similar everywhere in the world, is, it's one of the very tough majors, right? And it's like this concept that you don't learn anything because it's a lot of math, a lot of, numbers, but what you do in Chile, it's 6 years. It's very uncommon. Undergrad engineering is 6, not 4, 6 years. So it's a long undergrad. Is that you train in a way your mind, you're trained like in a military camp, right? To do very hard equations, mathematics, and then you go out to the world. And in LATAM, most of the people in finance come from engineering, which is, I don't know if it's common elsewhere, but JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, most of the hires they have come from engineering, right? And so I said, okay, I'll do finance. I would lie if I told you, look, I wanted to be a banker all my life, but I also saw JP Morgan and M&A as a way to, I was young, not married, single. So I said, look, I'm going to work for 3 years in this thing that you work, 24/7, 7 days a week, right? And in 3 years, I will work what I would work in 9 or 10 years in another field. And jumped right in. So I started, and the plan, Charlie, was to do 3 years of banking and then do an MBA, to be honest. But then I started liking it. I started liking finance, right? Building financial models. I started doing really well, and I got an early promotion when I was 27, 28. And then, one thing led to another, and I moved to New York. I started in Chile, and I was, 10 years in, at JP Morgan. I had not done the MBA plan. And the plan was never to do, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but to be honest, I was having such a good time in banking. It's a very dynamic, as M&A, you're doing different industries, different sectors. And as crazy as it sounds, I really loved working in banking. I really enjoyed my time there. I was telling an anecdote the other day to a friend that I think one of the things that maybe I did differently than other analysts, associates, VPs. I remember working, on the weekdays until 2, 3 a.m. at night. And I would go walking back to my apartment, looking at the Manhattan, skyline, and, being grateful about being there. Like, being in New York, like having the opportunity to, be in the center of the financial. And I would do that every day, different to a lot of people that would like, shit, I'm working again until 2 a.m. in the morning. Why am I doing this? I saw it always as an opportunity, right? Coming maybe from humbling beginnings in Chile. And anyhow, I enjoyed the ride. And then something happened in 2013 that, a year before we met, that changed the script and what I would do next. I was one of the business trips. I was in Chile and I was having lunch with my mom, and she had these pimples in her chest. Long story short, she got diagnosed by a very severe form of leukemia. 24 hours after those pimples, she started having chemotherapy. And anyhow, 2 months after that, the doctors were, your mom has 6 months to live, and so you should stay close for her. And as you can imagine, that changed my perspective on life immediately. I was shit. I mean, I was 34 at the moment, being the top of my career, the good life in New York. And suddenly, life just took me down to, reality. And I was like, shit, my mom's gonna die. I had lost my dad when I was 16. I'm the oldest of three brothers, and again, life was facing me, with the fragility of life, and that things change in an instant. What I started to do, Charlie, at that moment, started to ask myself, wow, life is fragile. And what if I went out in the street tomorrow and got hit by a bus? Fifth Avenue, how would I measure my life? Would I measure it by my professional success? Would I measure it by the money I had in the bank? And I started a very personal process about the meaning of life. I started watching TED Talks, reading, books, which is my passion. And, we all try to come to these, personal, I came to the conclusion that a good way to measure my life would be to see the impact, the energy I had, God's gifts that I had given to make an impact in other people's lives, right? And how I was using my energy to make that happen. And I started asking myself at 34, what am I doing today to make an impact in other people's lives? And I could not answer that question. So that made me, after 6 months, to a conflict. And I went to my boss at JP Morgan. I told him, Poncho, I'm quitting. And he's like, what? You're quitting? What are you doing? I'm like, are you going to Goldman Sachs, to Morgan Stanley? I'm like, no. I'm moving to Africa. He's like, what? What are you going to go do in Africa? Then the reality at that moment, I just wanted to take 6 months, a sabbatical. And, just focus all my energy in making an impact in other people's lives. The idea was not to do, be a monk for all my life. It was just 6 months, right? And I just wanted to see, 6 months spending all my time, all my energy in making the impact. And then I would come back to, normality or something. And that's why I quit the bank, to your question. Then I moved to Africa. And as everything in life, right, a lot of things happened that were not part of the script, and the seeds were planted to what would later become Burn to Give, Betterfly, Big Parks, right? And I just didn't know it at the moment. But if I hadn't made that jump, which everyone told me at the moment, you're crazy, you've been 10 years in banking, you're working like a maniac. Now it's time to, you cash in all the hard work and you quit right now. That does not make sense. And anyhow, I followed my gut, and I went to do volunteer work, in Tanzania. And just to make a very long story short, two things happened in that journey that planted those seeds. The first one has to do with, with childhood malnutrition. I got to work with kids with malnutrition. That is something that is non-existent in Chile or the US, right? We have overnutrition, but not undernutrition is non-existent. And the other one had to do with the Ironman triathlon, right? And, I saw this video of Ironman Kona one night in YouTube under my mosquito net. I was, 15 kilos, like 30 pounds heavier than I am today. And I saw it and I was like, this is amazing. I mean, how can someone do this? This is crazy. I had been a tennis player when I was young. Before my father passed away, my dream was to become a tennis player. I was really good playing tennis. He passed away. My family went into bankruptcy, so I could not continue playing tennis. And I said, when I saw that video of the Ironman of Kona, I said, what happened to your tennis dreams, 20 years back, right? And as it like came, and I was like, I should start working out again. And so after Kona, I went back to Chile, started, training for triathlon, not for an Ironman, but a sprint, started losing the extra pounds of weight. And then is when it clicked, and this idea of, what if the pounds I'm losing, I could convert them into pounds of food for these kids I met in Africa? And what if I could recycle calories of sports into calories of food? And that's where Burn to Give came to play, and burn calories to give calories, which was the, MVP, if you will, of Betterfly and everything that would come after that.
Wow, I've never heard it, directly from you, how how it all was born, really. And it makes a lot of sense. Your path was interrupted by this very sad story of your mother, and then you had this gap to fill around meaning and impact, and you didn't really know what that was, but you were searching for answers, and your path kind of pieced that together, I guess.
Yeah. I remember one of the books that I think made me. It was a book that was talking about taking action in life, right? Many times you have these ideas and you think that, but most of the ideas, the most difficult part of building a company, I always say, or is getting started, right? We just we just don't get started, and
Mm.
that led me to quitting JP Morgan, going to Africa, and that triggered a series of events, right? Following my gut, following without knowing the what the outcome
Yeah.
would bring, that led to the creation of of Betterfly today, and that was not instant because it was Africa. After Africa, I came back to Chile. Yeah, I started doing triathlon. I founded Big Parks. I Tyndall Group in finance. I was trying to find my way back. Something had changed after that experience. So, I didn't know at the moment so clear, but I was like, I want to dedicate my life to creating something that I'm passionate about and that has an impact on other people's life. And those things have to be,
Yeah.
those two things have to be present. And yeah, I wouldn't have started that if I hadn't made that jump into the void, if you will, where common sense or and especially advice from people very close to me, that dear friends, family members, they were all, don't do it, this does not make
Yeah. I
sense,
think that's so interesting. It's like, the sum of everyone's advice is zero, at the end of the day. And I think what's interesting about you is you're obviously taking a lot of action. There are lots of stepping stones along the way to Burn to Give and Betterfly. But, you're clearly, into your personal growth and your books and everything. And how much, when you were making these decisions around these various startups that you were getting involved with, were you kind of going deep into thinking about what your superpower is, what you're great at, what your skill set is? Or was it kind of like, no, this kind of feels right, I'm going to jump into it and see what happens? How much planning and how much sort of considered thought, around so many different options that a capable guy that like you could do, but, you decide to do that and that and that.
Yeah, so I think so everything I think you have to place some. Let me put it this way: to create a company or or a career, my belief is in something you can really be great at. You have to do something first of all that you're good at, right? Because like I always put the example of singing. I love singing. I'm passionate about music. I'm a disaster. Like if you hear me sing, you would I cannot sing. I'm really really bad. So I could never be a singer. As much as I love it and I'm passionate about. So you have to have some sort of skill, not a crazy talent, or just some sort of skill and being good at something. The second part that is equally relevant is really enjoying what you're good at, right? Because anything, career, sports, building a company, it's such a long journey that you really have to enjoy what you're doing. And many times the things you're doing and that you love doing, others really don't like doing, and that's a very big competitive advantage, because building something big and something that will create a lasting impact, be it in your personal, professional life, is about compounding and along a very long period of time. So if you really love what you're doing, you will be able to do it for a long time, and most importantly, you will be able to have a higher resilience when things don't work out the way you want them to work. And that's the name of the game, especially building a company. Things do not work out. Not every day there's something that is not working. So the winner is the one that's gets up more times. And if you do something that you like a little bit, or if you're doing it for extrinsic motives of being a unicorn or financial success, you will be able to get up 20, 30, 40 times. You will not be able to get up the 400, 500, 1,000 times you need to get up to build something that lasts. So that's why that's the second one. And the third one, where I think the magic happens, is when it's something that you're good at, it's something that you're passionate about or that you really love, and it's something that creates an impact, beyond yourself, right? And it's something that, call it legacy, call it purpose, call it, social impact. But when you're doing something you love and it's creating, an impact beyond yourself, right? And it can be social impact, it can be, a solution that solves something that was not existent. And when you try to combine those three things into what you're doing, I think is where magic happens. So to your question, Charlie, that's what I've tried to do in everything I've done in my life, and especially when I've started Betterfly and Pick Parks, and then Burn to Give and Betterfly. It's had that combination of things, which I think are very necessary. JP Morgan, as I mentioned, as crazy as it sounds, I really loved banking. I really loved financial models. And I think, my career at JP Morgan was a really successful one, explosive one. And it wasn't because I was the smartest or the most talented or the better prepared from college to do, but it was because I really liked what I was doing. And I would raise my hand, Friday night asking for additional work because I wanted to, and that made me better and better and better. So yeah, that I'd say was the, to your question, something that I've tried to do. Of course,
Yeah.
always those three things, not always, that's the perfect storm, if you will, finding those things. But I think life is about, there's a quote that is being attributed, I think to various people. I think it's Pablo Picasso. It's, the purpose of life is to find your gift. The meaning of life is to give that gift away, right? So
give
there's
it
two
away.
steps in life. One is finding what you're good at, and the other one is giving it back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing that you're living this purpose and a life that seems to be the Eduardo's path, very much so, and so congruent, and so many magical things happen through that process. And I mean, I can resonate so much with what you said personally, because I think often people can be like, yeah, when they talk about, follow your passion, do something you're good at, people can sort of turn their nose up at that a little bit. But I've got firsthand experience trying to do a startup, build my own thing, which it was kind of for the wrong reasons. I was trying to, look good and prove myself, and for various other reasons, I got myself into it, and I gave up, a couple of years in, because it just didn't feel right. And I wasn't into it for the right reasons to have that staying power compared to what I'm doing now, which is very aligned and sort of on point with what you're saying. But just to sort of change track slightly, for everyone listening and aspiring, ambitious, driven entrepreneurs and business people, retrospectively, what you did was quite smart. You didn't take too much risk at the beginning. You went into the corporate route, you hustled, you probably made a bit of money, banked that, and then you did what you really wanted to do. Thinking about the world today, would you have kind of done the same thing? I know it's difficult because you didn't have the aha moment with your mother, later on, but for people listening, how do you think about that corporate banking type route versus being an entrepreneur and starting your own thing? And even just, I'm just going to throw in buying a business, buying existing businesses versus starting your own thing. Just talk to me about that for a second, if you were in your early 20s.
Yeah. And maybe for those listening, so I think everyone's path is very unique, right? And there's not a set path that I would, I get this answer a lot. Should I, college students, should I just, drop out of college and start a company today? Should I do, a corporate world in a high demanding job as consulting and banking and then start a company? How should I do it? And I think it's very individual. For me, personally, I probably could not be doing what I'm doing today if I hadn't gone through JP Morgan. I think it gave me, life tools, to be able to, do what I do today in a much better way. It also gave me maybe, a cushion to be able to risk more things later on, right? And that maybe I needed that, right? And others say, I don't need that. I can just risk it all at the go. So it's very independent,
Personal.
very individual. Yeah, very personal. So if I had to do it again, and it's a good question, like 2025, I would probably not spend 10 years. I would probably spend 3 years maybe, or 2 years, right? I think building a company today and in the years to come, and when I say a company, it can be a personal brand, it can be acquiring a business, and, it's going to be significantly, I don't know if the word is cheaper, but more capital efficient than it used to be, right? And I think that a lot of the skills that, you usually in the past learn in college or in, in work, they're already out there, and you can, learn them in a faster way with other people, sharing what they're doing, and it's already out there. I mean, it's for me, it's amazing what, YouTube and everything, podcasts and everything, how much you can learn from the experience of others. Probably do it earlier, but yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. If I went back in time, I would probably do similar to what I did. But that's me. That's Eduardo della Maggiora. That's my personal story. And that probably wouldn't work out for a lot of people. Others would probably start earlier. Others, decide being, and I always say it, in a career throughout their lives. And that's super valid as well, because you can find your life purpose either way, right? It's very, very personal. Not everyone has to be an entrepreneur. Not everyone has to make, those extreme jumps. It's trying to follow, as crazy as it sounds, your gut and what you're meant to do in this world, right? And we all have that calling. I really believe it. And it can be working in a restaurant. It can be starting a company. It can be working in academia, in the corporate world. The important thing is to look for that and, move towards that, right? And not let life just carry you and live the
I think it's
life.
I think it's so underestimated. It's something that we talk about a lot with in my coaching programs, and the work required often to really lean into figuring out, your sweet spot, your purpose, and getting really clear on what's right for you can be a total superpower. Because when you find that, then, the waves, all these other things like self-doubt and FOMO and comparison and, fear, they kind of, the waves part. But I think it's not an easy thing to do. I think, one is very lucky from a very early age. Some kids, teenagers, they know exactly what they want to do. That's beautiful, but it can take, and a lot of people fall into the wrong thing, and it takes a lot of courage, particularly slightly later on in life with the responsibilities and family and kids and stuff, if they're not in the right lane to think about sticking or twisting. So yeah, I really like that. So Eduardo, you from the outside, you're very much a golden success story, and this path to Betterfly is incredibly impressive. But I'm guessing there were setbacks and failures along the way. I mean, were there any? Can you share with us that you're a mere mortal?
Look, it's one of the bad things about social media, or seeing, you always, what comes out is that, the unicorn celebration, or the company, but there's so many setbacks. Like I like to say, like when people are like, oh, that person was lucky, or that and my answer is, I've probably failed way more times than a lot of people try, right? And the failure and stepping up, right, is I think underappreciated and undershared, right? And I think to my personal story, to my professional journey, to building Betterfly, right? We've struggled and we've failed more than the times we've won. And I think why we are the company, and I talk that we are, is because we've had that resilience and that why we exist and where we want to get to. And unfortunately, for those starting, right, they, you look at the story not only of Betterfly, but a bunch of companies, and you're like, oh my God, these guys were blessed with a magical, it's all great, but the reality is behind the scenes, it's a lot of struggle. It's very difficult. I mean, building a company like Betterfly is without a doubt the most difficult, professional journey. I mean, and I was coming from banking, which is a very, extreme and difficult M&A, industry. It's very difficult because it's uncertain. It's a lot of uncertainty. And yeah, as you grow, uncertainty changes in relative terms, but there continues to be uncertainty, right? And you have to unlock, additional levels and additional things to create more value, and it never stops. So Charlie, to your question, it's an amazing journey that I would not change for anything. But I mean, it's nothing. I mean, it's not as smooth as it looks from the outside. It's adapting to changing, to changing macroeconomic environments, to changing customer demands, to changing technologies, to changing, a lot of things, going in the wrong direction, and being able to adapt around that. So that's why I think one of the keys and one of the things that all very successful companies, I think have in common is a very clear why, and a culture that surrounds that why with, with crazy belief, right? And I think that is one of the things that at Betterfly has made, it's a superpower, right? And believe it or not, in the darkest days, that we've had a bunch of them, right? Maybe more at the beginning, less so now, but look, it's like this, right? There's this graph that is, you think success is linear. It's nothing but linear,
but that's more within Betterfly, and you've had your setbacks and it's up and down. But what about some of those other ventures that you were involved with and you started before Betterfly? Are they still going? Did any of those fail, or are they either continuing or you had exits?
Yeah. So Tyndall Group continues to, thrive. It's doing incredible, but I sold my stake in that company, so I'm not longer a part of that. Pick, Change Heroes, and a couple of others I was involved, all failures, right? They did not succeed, but they were completely necessary. If I wouldn't have founded those companies, I could
Yes,
not have
yes,
been building Betterfly.
yes.
So I'll put you an
Yeah. See, I
example.
think that's so important. That's so
That is
important for people to hear, because you can sort of see, oh, he started this business. There must have all been
no.
successes, and everything he's done is perfect. And it's important for people to hear that.
It's so important. Let me give you an example. Change Hero was a company I invested in and then became a very relevant, stakeholder. And it was fundraising, raising funds to build schools in Africa. It was very successful at the beginning. And the company went bankrupt, in a very short period of time after I invested and we started. But the lessons I learned there were instrumental to launching Burn to Give and Betterfly. I literally could not have launched Burn to Give the way I did if I had not participated and been in Change Heroes. Same thing with Big Parks. Big Parks, did not bankrupt, but did not grow as we expected it to be. It continues to be operational, but it, steady state. But if I hadn't built that company, there's a bunch of things in Betterfly that I could not have done. And I could be talking about this for 2 hours, but the important thing is that, well, Jeff Bezos, I think, said it best. That, you can only connect the dots looking backwards, right? And I think
I was thinking exactly the same thing.
And and for those listening, the missteps in the way, what you believe are failures, when you look back, and this is my life experience, are, you end up realizing that these were the critical steps to make the biggest success happens, right? There's another way to put it that, in life, if you put in a scale from 1 to 10, different chapters of your life, or different, from companies to things some are 10s, you kick it out of the stadiums. Others are 1s, right? Others are 2s. You need the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s to build the 7, the 8s, the 9s, the 10s, right? And the more 1s you have, the more 10s you build. So
Yeah, I love that.
That is so important. I mean, that is, and that is the beauty of life, that, and taking it maybe to endurance sports, right? People ask me, why do you think, triathlon and Ironman is so addictive? Why are people, enjoy it so much? And my answer to that, right, is that, or let me start with the joyful part. Like for me, crossing those 100 meters before crossing the finish line in an Ironman is like, if I had to bottle up happiness, that for me is the feeling of happiness. And the reason behind it is because behind that, it's a year of, sacrificing so many things, waking up early, not going out, and then you did that sacrifice for so much time that allowed you to accomplish something, right? If you did not need those sacrifices and that, trade-off, you would not enjoy that much crossing that finish line. So life is, building a business is a mix of falling, a mix of, delaying gratification, a mix of sacrifices that are completely necessary to succeed and to, achieve those, those highlights or those, the winning, the victories of our life. So yeah, you need those. And many times, right? And this is very important, when you're in that struggle, in that dark spot, right? You're not connecting the dots at that moment. You don't know that that's going to be a stepping stone. But then you have to believe something. You have to believe your gut that is going to, serve in some way or form to what you're going to do next. And I really believe that's the case.
I want to get into the endurance stuff more in a second, but I just want to come back to Betterfly for a second. And I'd love you just to tell us, just riff on it for a second. I want to understand where you are at the business, with the business now, what your why is. Just explain it briefly to people that don't know much about Betterfly. But I'm also curious to know a bit more about your leadership philosophies and building that culture, because I know that that's something that you're very good at and you're big on. So if you could just share some of that for a second.
Sure. So let me maybe start with, the vision we have as a company, and where, and our mission, which is empowering people to live their best lives, right? And that, can be a very broad, maybe, definition. Okay, what does it mean to empower people to live their best lives? And we believe it's if you want, it's a bunch of things, but it has to do with, first, you having the necessary tools and, and the ability to, to live in good health, if you will, have, energy, have, adequate sleep, be able to, spend quality time with friends, with family, right? And a bunch of things, if you will, that are meant to improve your overall health, right? All across the spectrum, and a lot of things to be yourself, if you will, better each day. And it's of course the baseline, but it's also, right, connecting with others. It has to do with learning new things, with growing, right? And the definition of being well, of being, is very unique, and it changes throughout your life. But that's, we put empowering or living your best life as, that's the first part of that. And the second one is what you're doing to other people, to the, what is the impact you are creating beyond yourself, right? You can, in our philosophies, you can have a lot of things in life. You can have money, you can have health, you can have, but if you're not doing something for someone else beyond yourself, you will not be a fulfilled, human being, right? And that is absolutely necessary. So that's what we try to convey. So Betterfly, that's our overarching mission. And how we, or how we make that happen is that, we created this platform that integrates, it's an all-in-one healthcare platform that connects, traditional healthcare services or, traditional medicine with preventative longevity care, right? In a gamified experience. So look at it as an all-you-can-eat or all-in-one health solution, from traditional medicine to, preventative longevity care, with the caveat that we gamify this like Duolingo does with languages. We do it with health, right? And a big part of the gamification is that every healthy habit, every healthy behavior you do around your well-being, the well-being of others, is rewarded with social impact to different charitable causes around the world, right? So you go out for a run, you burn 500 calories, we give 500 calories of food for a child in need. You sit down and meditate 5 minutes. We plant 5 trees, around the world, and we use a purpose-driven gamification, as we call it, right, to incentivize healthy behavior across our users and our companies. And it's a B2B2C model. So we go to companies as a healthcare bundle, right, for their employees, where a big component has to do with, preventative care and not only treating disease when it happens, but preventing disease to happen, right?
I'm with you. So whether it's B2C or B2B, the individual gets access to health insurance, private health insurance, and they get, like, the better they live their life, then they get credits towards doing good. Is there any financial kickback or tokens to them? I suppose if it's the B2C model, do they have to pay less at the end of the year for their premium if they're living really well? I suppose the B2B model, maybe the company has to pay less for the insurance premium. Is there anything like that baked into it?
There is. So we reward people for living healthier 2 ways. One is the ability to give back for free, right? And, feed someone, plant a tree. And the other one is that you get rewards and lower insurance, right, with those good habits, right? So it's 2 ways. It's a social impact and it's a financial impact for yourself, right? And we discover that some people are totally social and they just want to give everything away. A lot of people want a financial gain as well, and we mix the best of both worlds, right? So yeah, it's all the health, as you mentioned, health insurance benefits that you would get from a traditional carrier, plus all the longevity services, preventative services, and embedded in this gamified experience where the healthier, the happier you are, you will have a financial gain and you will be able to make an impact in those around.
It's such a great idea. I mean, it's one of these really, what's the word I'm looking for? Practical utilities for technology. You have car insurance and you've got the idiot that's driving 1,000,000 miles an hour, going through cameras all the time. You've got someone that's really careful and does everything properly, whatever. They're both paying the same insurance. And so baking in the monitoring system and the AI and et cetera to make adjustments on, who pays what. I think it just makes sense. It's very efficient. I mean, some people like it, some people don't. The good people like it, the bad people don't, right? But I think it's a great idea.
And the good thing is that one of the things we've learned is that I don't want to say everyone likes it, but I think they do, because we don't punish people for not doing those healthy habits. We only reward people for engaging in good behavior. So those who, fuck it, I don't want to walk or meditate.
There's just they're the baseline.
They're the baseline, and they have a bunch of benefits, right? And they tap into other features of the platform, flexibility, personalization, a bunch of things, but we don't punish them, right? And that's one of the things we learn in behavioral economics is that, if you start punishing people or not, that boomerangs back to you and people just don't want to get it. It's like what happened with the car insurance, right? Those Metro Mile and a bunch of companies, I don't want to name companies, but people that did not drive well, they just didn't want to use it because, it was something that was going to be more expensive for them at the end of the day.
Yeah, they might get bad points against them. Yeah.
Exactly.
And talk to me about the leadership, Eduardo.
Sure. So I think if I had to summarize leadership, for me, leadership has to be with lead by example. And I think my, leadership, at least, I'm always learning, right? And I try to, grow as a leader. As you can imagine, being a leader of a company with, 10, 20 employees is very different to being a leader with a company with 100 employees, 200, 500. And that's, you have to grow as a leader, right? And I think what I haven't changed, I think is leading by example. I believe, and I have to be the first one, in, the last one out. And if I want people to do something, I have to do it myself first. And I think that's something I try to do and, and embed in the culture. And I think another piece of leadership is that, I see leadership as, I'm there for my team and I'm there for them, right? I don't need them to report things to me or I'm at the end of the day, we try to invert the pyramid, if you will, of, the hierarchy of how we operate. And, the C-level, for example, I'm like, okay, how do you need me to help you do what you need to do, right? Every week, every day, right? And that's something counterintuitive, but it's worked out pretty well. So we try to empower, a lot people within Betterflies, very driven, high-performing people. And the more senior you are, the more available you have to be there to help others, unbottle things or turn fires out or, open roads or to make them be able to achieve what they need to do. I would say I'm a very passionate leader as well. I really love what passion can go a lot of ways, right? You have to be careful with that because when I'm, I'm really passionate about what we're building and what we're doing. But sometimes when things do not work out the way I want them to do, that passion
goes the other way. Yeah,
exactly. I've learned to control that passion, but I think people appreciate that because when you see that, someone in your company that is excited about what you're doing and that excitement continues to be there and not only continues to be there, but increases day by day, people are also excited to come to work, right? And I'd say I try to bring that into the company, and it's not forced. It's something that comes to me naturally, right? So yeah, I think that's a little bit my leadership style. I try to be as humble as I can. I think I always share this story. I shared it when we became a unicorn. We're lucky to be where we are, right? There's thousands of companies that, maybe were with the same level of preparation and did not have the opportunity we have. And we always have to be grateful that we're able to do what we do. And that's why, the more we grow, the more success we have, the bigger the responsibility we do have to pay it forward, right? And paying it forward, it means a lot of things. It means helping those that are starting. It means, sharing our story in this podcast like I'm doing with you, with others. It means helping other entrepreneurs and being true to what we need to do and everything around us. The gratefulness or the gratitude mindset, I would say, Charley, is something that I've for leadership, I've used a lot. I really believe in that. It's one of the habits that I've practiced the most for, throughout my life is, being grateful, on a daily basis, writing down what I'm grateful about. And it trains the mind to operate in a different way. And last but not least, that has to do with Betterfly. A key part of leadership for me is to make sure my team is performing and is healthy and happy, right? I think there's we preach, maybe I'm preaching to the choir, but if you're healthy, if you're happy, I'm very convinced that you will perform at a different level, and happiness comes first than success. So I truly believe that when people are happy, they will be successful. It's not that success will bring you happiness, right? So it's the inverse relationship. So I try to, what I try to assess when I'm having a town hall, when I'm sitting down with leaders, is seeing if, people around me are healthy, are happy, are really enjoying what they're doing, right? And when that's not the case, I try to change things around and have that conversation. Sometimes it's People are not sleeping, people are not exercising, people have, a problem, that's something that's true, and that's what I would say is the most direct impact I try to create when I see one of my leaders or someone I'm working close to. So, and that for me is very important, right?
Mm. And that can be very counterintuitive for a lot of people because, as you know, a lot of people are just very ambitious, driven people, particularly in startups, working super hard and, they've got the eye on the prize of success and they're not present, they're not grateful, they're not able to enjoy the process. So I guess there's a sort of unpicking of that. We talk a lot about, finding that sweet spot or blissful dissatisfaction, as I've heard the phrase coined before. It's like happy enough in the now, but enjoying the road and working towards, clear vision of the future. And, is that something that you talk a lot about and, within your company and when you're hiring people?
Yeah. So I think a big mistake founders and executives and people do is that, it's like, let's grind. I did it at JP Morgan at the beginning. Let's not sleep. Let's just work ourselves, until we, pass out and then, at some point we will reach success and we will be happy and we will be able to, to sleep. And I think that's completely messed up and it's the opposite.
I've been there 100%.
Yeah. We've all been there. And I think, again, I'll go back to what I shared earlier, building a lasting company, a really lasting
You have
company.
to last as well, right?
You have to last and you have to be here for a long, long time. And to be able to do that, you have to have resilience. You have to, be able to go many ups and downs, many economic cycles, right? And for that, you need to be, happy today. You have to be well today. To be able to embrace, the ups and downs, you have to be mentally strong. You have to be physically strong. You have to be, you have to have the right mindset and you have to be enjoying what you're doing, right? That does not mean you're not going to fall down. That does not mean you're not going to have tough times. No, it means, you're taking care of yourself. You're taking care of your mind, of your body, of your soul, and that is extremely important because that sets you up for success. That sets you up to tolerate failure. That sets you up to, look at the bright side of what is happening. That sets you up to make better decisions, right? That sets you up to, to lead better. So I really believe that, your health, your happiness is the number one thing you should pay attention to. There's things that are maybe more subjective, like mindset, but there's other things that, you should be sleeping, you should be eating healthy, you should be exercising, you should be connecting with your family. Those things are like, I always share examples of what I do, right? When I have very important board meetings or leadership teams or weeks I will make a decision, I prioritize sleep. I prioritize eating healthy more so than I would other, because that's for me is if I did not do that, I would just, collapse, or I would not make as good as a decision, or I would not last as much as I do. So I think health, well-being for being a leader is absolutely critical. And again, and the concept of, it's not that we not being ambitious, right? It's not that you don't want to achieve success, but understanding that happiness does not come, by that goal, if you meet the budget or you become a unicorn or you IPO. I mean, that, of course, you strive that. Happiness has to be here today, right? Every single day. And that happiness is what is going to bring that success going forward. I mean, the happy, and there's I could point out thousands of books and research around this, and human beings and, society has made us believe it's the other way around, but no, it's the opposite, right? There's a really good book called The Happiness Advantage for those listening that is around this concept. And it's basically saying, look, the most successful people, the most successful companies in the world, the most successful entrepreneurs, they're happy today. They're not, they're not. And that happiness is precisely what brings success, along the way.
Yeah, that's such a good point you made. It reminds me of a quote by Jim Carrey, quite a famous one, where he's basically saying, I wish everyone in life could get whatever they want, whether it's, money, success, fame, because when they get that, they'll realize that wasn't the thing. So if they realize that wasn't the thing, they'll realize it was some other thing, and they could save themselves decades, a lifetime even, of chasing, and then figuring it out, maybe never figuring it out. Right. So it speaks very much to what you're saying.
And another thing that, connected with what I shared earlier, like, I really believe that happiness comes from who you become when you achieve those milestones in life. And that's why failure and, those missteps are so important, because getting out of those, right? And getting out of the shit, this is not, and then overcoming that is what is where happiness is. Happiness is not only in the process it's, when you achieve that IPO, when you achieve that unicorn, or when you achieve that rate that, you crossed it, it's not that end game. It's the process, but it's overcoming struggle and who you become in that journey that, dictates, and that is why the concept of the process, of embracing failure, of looking with optimism the future, and, learning from everything that does not work out is so important, because that dictates, how you will live your life and the overall happiness that you will have.
Yeah, I mean, I love how you sort of summarize that. And it's kind of, instead of zeroing in on the big moment, it's when the big moments come, you're almost coming back to see the perspective of everything and just a moment in time. Could you share, Eduardo, retrospectively, specifically about Betterfly, a mistake that you've made or a valuable lesson, within building the business?
Sure. So I think a lot come to mind, but I think the most maybe practical one for those, we grew too fast, right? In the 2020, 2021, boom, if you will, right? We raised a ton of capital. We opened, almost 10 markets in less than a year, right? If I would go back in time, I would not do that at that speed. It was chaotic, to say the least. And I would say the most obvious part, I'll try to share the less obvious part of why I think that was a mistake, and, and the lessons learned. And it has to do with culture, right? When you grow too fast, maybe the obvious thing is don't grow that fast because you can break things, or you can, if you open 10 countries and, in 10 months, operations will not work. But it's actually not that. It has to do with culture. When you start growing too fast, you start, you cannot bring enough people in enough time. So you start, the culture starts to, I wouldn't say transform, but it's completely different than the one that you would build if you would build it in a more, I would say, organized space. And never underestimate the importance of that, because once that happens, it's very difficult to fix, right? And I'd say
internal culture,
right? And maybe the obvious, right? When we were a small team, I would interview every person that would come in the company, right? And if it wasn't me, it was a team that knew, how. But then when you're growing, 100% month over month, you just need to bring people to start meeting that demand. And in the short term, there's no problem. But then, when you have, when you start, when some things start not working out, the culture comes into play, and building. So that for me is one of the biggest lessons, right? And I remember reading a lot of books, and experiences from just grow fast, hyper growth. I really don't believe that. I think you have to, keep an eye on that. And that's probably one of the biggest mistakes we've done. And the biggest impact was culture at the moment, right?
Interesting. Okay, let's switch gears to endurance, Ironman. I mean, you've been unbelievably successful. You've been on the podium twice in the World Championships. Is that right?
Three times.
Three times. Apologies. You've been on the podium 3 times in the World Championships, which is unbelievable. But I'd like you, this is an unbelievable feat. Ironman's become so popular globally, and there are so many people out there trying to be good at it and training. Could you just walk me through your approach? When you decided, I'm going to take this seriously, did you, cancel everything in the diary, hire the best people to train you in the world, think like an Olympic athlete, train the whole time and just become obsessive about it? And that was your goal. You're really going to go for this and believe in yourself. What was that process like?
Sure. So yeah, maybe as context, right? Up until I was 35, I'd never swam more than 100 meters. I'd never, used cleats in a bike. I knew how to ride a bike, but I never used cleats, right? And that's when I did my first triathlon. I was 15 kilos heavier than I am today, and that's when I gave a crack at this sport and, became obsessed about it. So when a year after I started, I decided to go, I would say, all in, Charlie. And to your question, I'd say it's obsession, right? And it's focus in doing something. And I'll try to share the less obvious definition of focus, right? Focus has much more to do on what you will not do than what you will focus on. Because like I say, I can focus on this, you continue to, so this is for Ironman, this is for building a company, this is for a lot of things I've done in my life. It has to do with the concept of essentialism, of focus, right? And focusing on something for me is, what will I stop doing to be able to focus on this, right? So, and in my case,
it's the other things that you want to do that you're saying no to at the same time.
Exactly. So in terms of Ironman, of course, I read like 50 books when I started about, the sport, nutrition, everything. I remember I built this Excel file about, the common characteristics of, the top 10 athletes in time, what they've done similarly, what they've done differently. I'm an engineer, so I like using data and numbers. And then I stared, training. At the beginning, I didn't have a coach, and I started training, and I came first to a realization that, I need to put a lot of hours on this, right? And I remember at the moment I was building Tyndall Group, I was starting Pick Park, so it wasn't just, right, dedicating myself to sport, but I started saying, okay, what can I stop doing? And for a period of time, besides work, besides my girlfriend at the moment, who then became my wife, I would just train, eat, sleep, recover, and that's it. And when I say I just did that, I did it. I did not have any social media. I would spend 10 minutes a day in social media, which is probably, it's a very, very small portion of time compared to maybe the 3 hours I was spending before, as everyone in the world. And I would just, dedicate myself to triathlon. And I did that for a long period of time. I did it for like a year. And then
But you were building Tyndall Group at that time as well.
Yeah. So I would, like, a typical day for me would be to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, train 2 hours, then go to work at 8, then have lunch at 1, swim. I would swim at lunch, then go back to work, go back at night, and and do this all over again from Monday to Friday. And then weekends I would train more. But I would document all my data, and we're talking about 10 years ago, where you did not have the wearables you have today, right? In terms of obsession, has a lot of flavors, but maybe in my case it was real. Like, I would have an Excel file with every micro and macronutrient I would consume. How would that affect my training, my heart rate, my power on the bike? I did not start doing that at the beginning. I started doing that when I realized, shit, I can, I won a race, I remember. And then I said, okay, you know what, Eduardo? Let's see where the body can go. And then, Charley, I said, okay, I'm going to, I'm 37. My dream was to become a tennis player when I was 17, 16. I could not do that. I'll give myself a couple of years to see where I can take my body at 37. And I'll just focus in the process, because I cannot control, the race, the out. I can just, and what does the process mean? Training the most consistently I can, okay? And that means not getting injured. That means, having the right sleep quality, not drinking alcohol. And this is going to take a long time, because it's not going to be from 1 month to the other, right? So I wrote a 5-year plan, right? And I said, hopefully between years 3 and 5, I will be able to see these results. So, and that was, I'm not skipping one day. So I'm not going to skip one day of workout. I'm going to sleep. And that was no alcohol, no sleeping, after, 9 p.m., not even having, just to share how extreme I was. Like, I remember I would have a brownie, which I love, once every 5-6 months. And it was like the pleasure of everything I would put in my body was, thinking as if I were a high performing Olympian athlete, which I was not, right? Because at that time I did that consistently, day in, day out, right? Without seeing immediate results. At the beginning, I was really bad at swimming. I hadn't, starting to swim at 35, anyone who's experienced that can biking. I ran, but I had run a half marathon. I wasn't like a professional runner. So I started doing that, Charley, and with the core belief that 2-3 years down the road, something would result. And to my surprise, after 2 years, when I became a world champion runner-up, actually in Australia in 2016, that happened. And then it happened again in 2017, but it was a result of just extreme obsession, extreme discipline, and delaying gratification for a very, 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 very long time. And it's not crazy, but it's like when I achieved that, the first reaction of people were, "Oh, this guy's so talented. This guy is so talented, right? I mean, this guy's what? Oh, JP Morgan. Now at that moment I hadn't started a company yet, or I was still, but it was like, oh my, in 3 years he became a world champ. But the work behind what I had done was what got me there. And when I started, I always share this. I remember taking VO2 max test, like I was average at best. Like I'll share this story. The first half marathon I ran it in 2 hours. That is the average, run time of, and then when I became world champion in Australia, I ran the half marathon in 1 hour, 17 minutes, but that's after riding a bike. Right. So that was, that's the same person, right? The same person that, when I did the 2 hours in the New York half marathon, I was like, shit, there's no way I can go faster than this. But it was just training the body, with food, with sleep, with training, and being super consistent for a long period of time. I remember writing down in a diary, the amount of days I was like, fuck this, I really don't want to train. It's cold. It's it was more than half of those days, right? And that's when I would give myself extra points to do it, because I would like, this is when
You knew those were the ones that really counted.
Those are the ones, and that compounding, like for me, was shit. It's so incredible what the human body can do. And again, I'm an average Joe, because sports and endurance sports is something you can measure that. Like if I would have done my first half marathon, or I would have been at natural times, I would have done it in an hour and a half. I did it in average VO2 max, average, and it was just a lot of obsession. And my end, maybe your question is, what were you looking? Do you want to be? No. My dream there, Charlie, was to, and my wife knows this, because my dream is to share this story one day, and and try to share with grit, with discipline, what you can achieve. And an average Joe, right, like me, with these stats, with these, can become one of the best in the world just by doing the work day in and day out, right? And sharing that story. And without knowing it, right? Yeah, I finished number 2 in the world, which was a surprise for me and for many others. But that was not the goal. That is not what made me,
Yeah, it's like, let's do the best I can, personal greatness, consistency, and then let's see what that will end up looking like.
Exactly. And understanding that consistencies, I'm not going to see the results in a week, in a month, or in a year. I'm going to see them, I don't know when, but let's just trust that is going to play out at some point.
No, it's an amazing story, and congratulations on everything that you've achieved there. I mean, I even remember when we first met and we were in the hotel near San Francisco, in the lobby, everyone arrived, everyone was tired, but you were straight into that. I saw you on the treadmill. I was like, Jesus, that guy's quite, it was like nearly midnight. And you had this sort of way about you where, you were kind of on a bit of a mission. You didn't socialize as much as everyone else. And I was like, that guy's sort of headed somewhere. What would you, I think, am I right in saying that you've said in the past that endurance, triathlon, Ironman, it's a metaphor for life, and, sort of building on that point, what do you mean by that? And what would you say is the sort of the thing that has helped you with, in terms of your mindset, has helped with your success across being an entrepreneur, being a successful athlete, and continuing to develop this growth generally in your life?
Yeah, I think, I've shared that a bunch of times. I've shared, how endurance, how the Ironman triathlon, in my case, is similar to life, to building a company. It's about, the person who wins an Ironman is really the person. It's not the most talented. It's not, it's the person that, stands up, the most amount of times when they fall down. There's no Ironman where you don't want to throw up, where, you just want to quit, you want to stop, right? And it's more a mindset, a mental game than a physical one, right? I think the top 50 people who finish the Ironman, in an Ironman race are probably physically, very similar, right? The difference is in terms of mindset, right? Is that, you yourself talking to your brain saying, when you want to throw up, when you want to stop, when you start cramping, convincing yourself that you still have in the tank, that, why you're doing this. And that struggle, because, believe me, it's not pleasant, right? Your body's aching, right? You're breaking apart, is completely necessary to embrace and enjoy that finish line and that journey that you're doing. So for me, the resemblance with life is like, life, the beauty of life isn't those moments where you think, shit, life is unfair, it's not working for me, right? It's so difficult, right? And it's embracing those and understanding that those moments are part of the journey, right? And understanding that, everything good in life, everything beautiful in life requires effort, requires sacrifice and requires discipline, right? And
Mm.
the effort, one of the values at Betterfly that we have is perfect effort, right? It's it's fine if we don't achieve whatever it's what we do not sacrifice is the effort. You have to, the effort in life, what you put in is so important to whatever you want to do, right? And that's the only thing you can control, right? So I think it's something I deeply believe in, and yeah, to frame it is that one of the beautiful things about an Ironman, like you have to put in it's not like you will finish the race if you don't it's impossible. Even if you're the most talented person in the world, you cannot finish an Ironman if you don't put in the hours and train. Maybe talented people will train less, maybe less talented people will train, but everyone has to put in the effort and do the sacrifice. And I think life is a little bit that, right? And I think we've, the last 15 years, because of social media, you see these stories, overnight success stories, and, especially younger generations, things that, that's success in life, and nothing's further apart from the truth, right? And I think nothing meaningful in life, personal relationships, professional success comes without effort, without, having to put a lot of work to get there. And it's completely, the more effort you put, the more hard work, the more you will enjoy that finish line, that outcome, right? And I think that's why I always compare, endurance sports, Ironman with life, because I think they're very similar, right?
Mm. And you kindly shared a little video of your pain cave at home. I'm very jealous of, with all your training stuff and motivational and all your awards and stuff. Which, if it's all right with you, I'd love to share. But this tolerance for pain, did that happen over time? Like, you seem to be someone that's got a high tolerance for pain. Where did that come from?
That I think came from, so when my dad passed away when I was 16, right? Came from a middle to high income family in Chile. Played tennis, as I mentioned. My only worry in life was to play tennis, to be honest. I did not have any, went to school, but tennis was and then my dad passed away and my family went into bankruptcy. And my life, and I went into a very painful period of my life, right? I mean, it was, my dad actually did not pass away right away. He was 2 years in the hospital, in a coma. And it was a very stressful and painful period of my life. And in that period, I think I learned that, I don't have the answer on why I went that route, right? I could have gone maybe towards drugs, or I decided to take a different route and say, I'm going to use this pain to become a better person, to be able to help my family. That was like my only, and get away of this, like even physical pain I was feeling at the moment. I went and I changed tennis for studying. I went from being an average to poor student to, being the valedictorian in my class. And I started doing things that, again, small things. Like I remember studying every day, 15 minutes, right? And then, achieving academic success. And I was like, damn, this is incredible. And I, translated that pain into study, which is crazy. And then I got into engineering. I did the same thing, graduated at the top of my class. I was not the smartest. I would just put every day a little bit of study, right? And then when my mom, again, was sick and diagnosed with leukemia, same thing kicked in. And I really believe that if I look back, Charlie, in my life, the ups and downs and, everything that I've, made me become who I am, those painful moments, losing my dad, being with my mom in the hospital when she was, with her treatment, I wouldn't wish those moments to anyone, but they made me become who I am. And I would not trade them for anything, because they gave me the strength, the clarity, the purpose, the meaning, to go live my life the way. And I really do believe that in the moment I did not see it, of course. I was having, but looking back, I would not trade them for anything. And that's why when I'm faced with struggle, I try to look at the silver lining of it, because I really believe there is a silver lining in everything. And that not needs to be only like big, but small pain. Like this morning I was doing intervals in the bike and I was like, fuck, this hurts so much. But if I did not do those, I will not be a better cyclist. So again, it comes back to what I shared earlier, that I think it's been, to your question, more life experience than anything, and I learned it very early on with my dad, and throughout life, throughout building a company, everything I've shared is that, life is about that. It's not that I want to recommend a lot of books, but there's another, I really like,
keep them coming. Keep the recommendations.
Philosophy The Obstacle is the Way is a really good way, a really good book around that. And, I think society would benefit from looking at the world like that. I mean, there's so much good in the world. But there's also a lot of people that are struggling, and I do believe going through those struggles are superpowers in disguise, right? And when you look at it that way, life, is completely different. So yeah, I don't know where that came from, but I think it's more personal experience what I've had to experience in life. And yeah, there's another, I don't remember the book. There's another book which talks about a happiness set point, and it tells about that when you have these struggles in life and you're able to manage them in the right way, your happiness set points actually is higher, right, than it was before. Right, which is pretty
Interesting.
interesting. Maybe because you appreciate life more, maybe because you don't take a lot of everything for granted, right? And I think, I don't know, it's something I continue to discover and to embrace.
Well, Eduardo, I mean, this has been a masterclass in so many things, and thank you for sharing and being so open. I was always so intrigued by you because I suspected, and just the little, maybe on social media, some snippets, and then I saw your pain cave one day, and I was like, oh, he's into all that stuff and the books and the motivation, the mindset. But I was always intrigued about the strategy and the struggle and the steps along the way. So thanks so much for unlocking that, because I think it kind of makes it makes it real, and for a lot of people listening. So thank you. And with all those, I know you've given a bunch of book recommendations already, but with all those books behind you and knowing how much just before we finish off, I'm just going to ask you for a couple more book recommendations, and I'm going to try and be specific to help you with those recommendations. So maybe one on, I know this is going to be difficult, but one on business for entrepreneurs, building and scaling a business.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So the hard thing about hard things is one I really enjoy, and I would recommend everyone to read, because it's about the struggle, right? It's about the things that the pink, very nice things about business. Building a lasting business, is about embracing the struggle and everything that happens in that part of building a company. So yeah, that would be one that comes top of mind
for business. Okay. And then philosophy, spirituality realm.
So many. I think you touched upon it, but I really believe our lives are dictated by how we see life, right? I think the quality of your life is the quality of your thoughts, right? And it's more how we see the world around us. And I think I mentioned this a couple of times, but Stoic philosophy is for me really a treasure, right? And I've tried to read every single book I can around that, right? From modern writing to Marcus Aurelius' Meditations book and everything in between. So I would recommend anything and everything around that, right? It gives you a fresh perspective around the importance of mindset in life, right? I think mindset is everything, period, right? And look, I share my story, Charlie. I'm an average person, right? And I'm not saying this to be humble or anything. I'm just, but I'm a crazy, passionate, obsessive, driven person, right? And that has gotten me to where I am, and it's made me successful. It's made me maybe fall a bunch of times, but I really think
it's very inspiring, Eduardo, and it comes through, and I think I can see how it's very important to you. And just as a bit of feedback, is that this is going to inspire a hell of a lot of people, and I can only imagine how you inspire people that work at your company and when you give talks and things. So it really is contagious.
Thanks, Charlie. And that's, look, one of my missions in life is sharing my story, especially sharing. I wouldn't say, that's why I talk about a lot of struggle, not the shiny part, because the shiny part comes to you will see online, the World Championships, the unique. It's the other part of the story where anyone can be where I am, or it's just a thing of mindset of wanting to do things. And especially today, different than 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? The years to come in the world are going to be the most extraordinary years to, for anyone, anywhere, to build the life, to build the business, the company, and just embrace it. And again, I said this, I think in the first 5 minutes, most of us get stuck in the initial step of, should I do it? Should I not? And that is, hopefully after hearing this conversation, just take
Action.
the jump,
Yeah.
action. I mean, life is too fragile. Life is going, in 100 years, nor you nor me are going to be here, and it's not going to, just live your life and try to do things, because, magic happens when you start pursuing what you're passionate about, what gets you up at night. And I'm just super privileged to have this energy, and I hope I can continue to do it. And that's why I'm so passionate about health, because when you sleep, when you exercise, when you take it allows you to be in the state of mind to go all in life, which I think is a beautiful gift. So yeah, man. So yeah, I mentioned there Marcus Aurelius, right? Meditations. Let me see. There's another good, for those interested more in energy. I've talked about health, and Good Energy is a really good book that came out recently, a year ago. I highly recommend it in terms of everything that has to do with health and well-being. Outlive from Peter Attia also is one of my favorites as well. But yeah, and maybe one about life, one I read recently. It's called The 5 Types of Wealth from Sahil Bloom.
I've seen that come out. I haven't read it.
Really good. Really
Recommend?
Good. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll put all of those books in the show notes. And what's next, Eduardo? Are you going for the #1 podium? What's next for you?
No, this year, given that there's no Kona, is every 2 years. So 2026, I'll try to do that again. This year, I'll probably try to qualify and compete in the in the 70.3 World Championships in Marbella, Spain, in November. So we'll see. I haven't gotten on the triathlon bike since Hawaii in last October, but I've been training on my road bike, on running, and hopefully I'll start competing again in a couple of months to qualify for the Worlds. So yeah, we'll see. And I'm trying this new thing called Hyrox, which I don't know if it's popular over there. Yeah, so I'm doing Hyrox in Miami in a month or so, and we'll see how that goes.
Come to Cape Town and do the one later in the year.
Yeah. I'll see. Let's see. It's one of these. My coach. He started doing it, and I was like, that's interesting to build strength. So it's a mix of endurance and strength training. So I'm doing this one in April, and looks fun. So we'll see how we do.
Yeah, I think if you're a good runner, it's a bit of a cheat, because you can make up a lot of the time. Well, Eduardo, thank you so much. It's been incredibly inspiring. My podcast is all about the intersection of business and personal development, and you are that. So thanks for inspiring all of us.
Thanks, Charlie. And thanks for the invitation. Good to see you after almost more than 10 years. And I hope we do this in person sometime soon.
Hope so too. Thank you, Eduardo.
Take care.
If you enjoyed the episode, please share the love and give us a cheeky follow, rating, like, or review. It really does make a massive difference. Don't be shy either to share any of your favorites on social media. This is a truly mission-driven project with the aim of helping to motivate, inspire, and give hope to as many people as possible that change, a better life, a new dawn is all possible. I genuinely love hearing from you and actively try to constantly improve things and bring guests on to address any specific themes. As always, you'll find resources and links from the episode in the show notes. You can follow me on all social media platforms as well as YouTube. And don't forget to check out my website, charleylaw.com. Until next time.